everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. We're looking at how marketing has changed in the face of a global pandemic. I'm James Alty, founder and managing director of a British software development business called Apteco. We're based in Warwick in the UK, and we provide the Apteco marketing suite. We're best known for our FastStats application. It's an analytics workbench that provides marketers with the ability to handle massive first-party data, that's CRM data typically, for analytics, visualization, modeling, targeting type work. We also produce the Apteco People Stage, multi-channel, multi-wave, multi-user campaign automation tool, and Apteco Orbit, which is our new web platform for all of the Apteco software that provides a great, easy to use, clean interface on any device that you have to hand with a modern browser, where you can prepare dashboards and interact with the data in the dashboard to produce filters that you can use for audience targeting and campaign upload, all from a browser. You could do all of that on a tablet. I'm going to be your host for the next 30 minutes. I'll make sure that we finish in time so you can get on with your day. And our topics for today are based on our data trends report. This is some research that Apteco does, which I'll introduce to you in a moment. And in particular, in today's session, we're going to look at the impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic on marketing teams, on how those teams are sized and how they're using outsourced services from agencies and partner and services businesses. We'll look at some of the choices those teams are making about marketing technology, their investment and adoption of marketing technology. We'll look at the marketing approaches taken by those teams and how those have changed in the time of the pandemic. And we'll look at the deployment of artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques by those teams. In the second half of the webinar, we'll move on to look at the trends for 2021, what our respondents told us about the topics that are important for their business. And we'll look at the top trend in a bit more detail. And of course, like any good webinar, I'll give you some key takeaways to finish the session. As I mentioned, this webinar is based on research that Apteco undertook to create our annual data trends report. This is a survey that we do at our annual user group. Typically, that has been a face-to-face conference in London with hundreds of delegates, users of the Apteco marketing suite, in which we ask questions about their view of the industry and the developments in the industry. Now, in 2020, clearly we couldn't hold a face-to-face conference in London. We were in the tiered lockdown in November, and so a face-to-face event was not possible. As a result, we moved to an online two-day conference with hundreds of delegates from all over the world joining us, and we conducted our survey online. And we're very grateful to the 150 responders who chose to participate in that survey. They were a mix of data scientists and analysts, marketing, communications and campaign professionals, people involved in the operational marketing equation. And they come from a wide variety of organizations in different verticals and with different sizes. And throughout today's presentation, I'll use the sort of visualization you see on the right-hand side, prepared in our FastStats application. This is the breakdown, in this case, of the roles of the respondents. And you can see the top role was data scientists and analysts, but at the left-hand side in purple, marketing and communications and campaign staff. So we have a good spread of delegates. Now, in this survey, as I said, we were operating in lockdown under a pandemic. And so, of course, we asked specific questions about how the marketing teams were working in lockdown, how the pandemic and the economic changes were impacting the delegates and the respondents. And we were looking at budgets and techniques and technologies that they were using, as well as their views looking forward from the tiered lockdown into 2021. And just to put it in context, in the UK, where we are based, the Centre for Retail Research reported that almost 180,000 retail jobs were lost in 2020, a 25% increase over 2019. So the economic situation was unprecedented, really, in our lifetimes. The change to the economic equation was massive. The government support with furlough schemes or Kurzarbeit or the reverse PAYE schemes that we've seen in different countries, taking different approaches to support the economy. So, retail suffering a massive shrinkage. How were marketing teams faring in that time? Well, what our respondents told us was that 7 in 10 teams could not or did not grow. They were either operating at the same size or with fewer team members than they had done previously, where perhaps typically marketing and the use of data was becoming more important in organizations. Now we were seeing that had ceased. They would no longer grow. Indeed, 30% reported that their team had shrunk. So colleagues had left the organization and the team was operating with fewer staff, let alone the issue of people also being on furlough, for example. It's interesting to note there is a minority where there was growth. And I imagine each of us has lived through the equation where we've seen the move to online businesses, certain businesses that have a strong online proposition and the operational techniques in place being very successful and growing. And that's obviously filtered through to the marketing teams in some of those businesses. So 15% of our respondents said that their marketing team had grown over the last year during the pandemic. However, only 1 in 9 of the respondents reported an increased use of outsourcing. So the in-house teams were smaller, the budgets were constrained, the retention of staff was reduced, and the outsourcing was not being used to fill that gap. Indeed, 16% of our delegates said that outsourcing was used less than before the pandemic, 40% said it was the same, and only 11% said they were using more outsourcing. So it seems that teams were smaller, the outsourcing was either the same or smaller for the majority of people or organizations. And that leads to a question about the structure of the marketing industry. How well are the service businesses able to survive through this period? How well will they do in winning that business back? Will we see the same relationship between agencies and marketing service providers and the clients and the brands as we had before the pandemic? Or is it a structural change? I don't think we can tell that from the research that we have done in 2020, but we'll use that as a reference point for further annual research to give us a trend over time. We'll see how that continues. More than half of our respondents said that they had either maintained or increased their investment in marketing technology, what's known colloquially as Martech. So in a position where teams were smaller, outsourcing was not growing and not being used to bridge the gap, perhaps here we see an investment in technology and a continued investment in technology to bridge the difference, to balance the equation. And when we look at that use of marketing technology, we see about a third of the organizations have kept their Martech investment the same as before the pandemic. 20%, however, are investing more. So in the year since we last researched them, during which the majority of time they were in pandemic conditions and lockdown, we can see 20% investing more in marketing technologies. So this may be a connection point where Martech is being used to bridge the gap between the expectations from the management team, who still want data about marketing, who still want marketing activity. They still want the brand to be visible and competitive and communicating with the customers, and the reality of the team position where there are fewer people needing to cover more bases. So we think marketing technology is perhaps the stretchy bit in this equation. Team size is down, but technology being used to bridge the gap. Indeed, when we look at organizations investing and making new Martech deployments, 40%, so 2 in 5 of the respondents continued to adopt Martech projects that had been planned prior to the pandemic. They continued to deploy those as the pandemic continued. Just 9%, so 1 in 10 effectively, adopted new technology specifically because of the pandemic. And again, this may be that group who were seeing growth and demand. They were seeing an increase in their activity with perhaps the consumer and their business clients move online, and those organizations needed new technology in their Martech stack to function and deliver the service that their organization was requiring. When we look at the Martech stack, so the mix of technologies that are used by our respondents, we can see 1 in 20 just use one tool. They're using a platform, keeping everything in the same suite, and using the capabilities of that suite to deliver what is needed. The majority of respondents have between 2 and 4 tools in their marketing technology stack. So those are tools that in some way will be connected together, operating together, perhaps driven manually, perhaps driven automatically with APIs and integrations. A minority, 13%, have more than 5 tools. So that may mean more than 5 user accounts, more than 5 data stores, more than 5 APIs, more than 5 contracts, more than 5 support teams. It's a challenge for those marketing teams with such an array of different tools in use that they have to learn and connect all of those items together. And just 1% have more than 20 tools in their marketing technology stack. Imagine trying to manage that, ensure coherence across data models and the flow of data across all of those tools. It's a real challenge. As we think about organizations acquiring marketing technology, and for most organizations, that's a multi-part equation, multiple platforms, multiple tools being used together, we asked what are the significant features that you look for when you're choosing marketing technology. And you can see the graphic on the right-hand side with a number of topics, from breadth of features through to operating cost and other factors. What we've done is pick out the top 4 for you in that equation, and we can see a pattern. 61% of our delegates said that they look for integration with internal systems. So they're looking for marketing technology that will connect with what's already there. So connectivity, integrations, application programming interfaces or APIs are important. Second was the initial cost, so the acquisition cost for the technology, the cost of deployment, the cost of training, the number of consultancy days required. That was the second topic. Third was ongoing operating costs. How many staff, what licensing fees, what additional costs are needed. And fourth, we come back to integration, and this time integration with external systems. So looking at the marketing technology proposition, how do we connect it to the platforms that we already use in the cloud or with public systems? So in effect, there are 2 topics that are used when selecting marketing technology: integration, internally and externally, and costs, both initial and ongoing costs. So that's what your colleagues are looking at when they're choosing marketing technology platforms to use. We asked our delegates how their marketing approaches have changed in the pandemic, and I don't think it's a great surprise that 50% are moving more activity online. I suppose you might have said, why is that not higher? But I imagine that's because businesses already had online activity and were already doing that work prior to the pandemic. So 50% here, we're having to do more to migrate to the online presentation. They've also changed what they do in the marketing communications. So near enough 40% have changed the style of their communications, and about a third have changed the frequency of their communications. So those subtleties of the message that's produced by a brand, organised by the marketing team, delivered to their customers and prospective customers was changing. And we see that as a result of in-person activity being put on hold, no longer visiting or trade shows or events or stores or branches. So online was the natural direction to move in. It seems to us at Apteco that communications have shifted from outright sales messaging to more supportive and operational messaging during the pandemic. And indeed, at the conference where we researched this data, we heard from one of our clients, ProTire, a tyre service business, that they were treated as an essential business during the lockdown tiers. They were required or enabled to stay open. So they had to communicate with their customer base that they were still present. They could still provide MOT safety tests. They could still provide tyre changing services. But the message had to change from pricing and service availability to one of the essential nature of the business, the requirement to keep cars and vehicles safe, and the fact that their branches were all COVID secure, so they could ensure a contactless service during the pandemic, perhaps for the essential workers in our hospitals or supermarkets who were continuing to operate when many of us were working from home. So communications changed. They used their communication mechanisms for different messages. And indeed, we saw in another example, the marketing technology and the infrastructure changed from acquisition marketing to actually more to do with the operation. In this case, it was a gyms group, and they were looking at how they informed about the availability in the gyms, but also the subscription collection mechanism. So the LifeFit group used their marketing technology to help stay in touch with their customers to collect the subscriptions. Now, when we look at AI and machine learning, we found about a quarter of our respondents continued to see AI as a priority. They were working on this already. They continued in the pandemic. They were really happy to press ahead. Slightly surprising to me, we found only 4% reported that AI was a new priority because of the pandemic. I imagine more people might have turned to AI with the pressure on their teams and their outsourcing their budgets. They might have turned to automation, but I suspect that the teams had so much to do to handle the new normal, to work in the constrained situation, that actually new projects were difficult to take on board. And you can see 20% found that AI fell in importance during the last year. So businesses are either keeping going or stopping their AI projects. I do imagine they will come back to this. I think it will return as data becomes even more pervasive. The shift to online that we saw a moment ago will continue. That data and the processing and intelligent insights extracted from it will continue to be significant, and AI, machine learning, can help organizations with that. Those businesses that are working on AI, however, have interesting topics that they wish to pursue. 2/3 felt that AI will add value in helping select content and product or service recommendations. It was the most popular choice in the question. What will you do with AI? It's going to help the marketing team present a relevant message for each individual recipient. The next most popular topics were, for example, targeting ads or programmatic display advertising, about 50%, using AI, or envisaging using AI for that. About 50% looking at optimizing channels, so using AI and machine learning to determine how to deliver the message once you've determined the message you want for a recipient. And again, about 50% creating segments, so using AI and machine learning to find the segments to treat as target groups to use for your campaigns. Now, let's look forward to the trends for 2021. And we presented our delegates with a choice of a series of topics to think about for the trends in 2021. We asked them whether they were interested in customer journey analytics, for example, looking at multiple channel touch points over time, or consent preference management. I think a topic we've all worked on since May 2018 and the introduction of the GDPR, looking at how we manage that with our customers in a clear, transparent manner, or real-time marketing, getting closer to the click, or customer data ethics and privacy. We know consumers and businesses value their data and how it's treated, and ensuring that our brand maintains the highest data ethics, I think now is important and can be upfront. Building conversational marketing, perhaps using AI for that marketing to build a conversation with the individual recipient. Using personification, so identifying personas, classifying customers in those personas, making marketing treatments suitable for the persona. Or one that I think is under-recognized, underutilized, the use of mobile wallets. I don't think many organizations realize if they put a loyalty card into a mobile device wallet, then you can message to that card in the same way you can if you operate an app on a device. But now it's an easy way to get into messaging to a consumer identified by that card in their mobile wallet. Were they still working on customer data platforms, CDPs, for example, or doing identity resolution, identifying people, or other topics? So those were the topics we offered them. The one that came out top and quite a clear margin was customer journey analytics, with 76% of the respondents identifying that as one of their top trends for 2021. So really quite a strong identification with that topic. Just to help you position that, I thought I would reference two of the analysts, and Gartner first defined customer journey analytics as the process of tracking and analyzing the way customers use combinations of channels to interact with an organization, covering channels present and future, which interface with the customer. So the interesting thing here is Gartner see it as an ongoing challenge. It's not something that you do now and put in place. It's something that will continue as future channels come on stream and you use those as part of the customer journey analytics, understanding how the customer is interacting across combinations of channels. So it's not just do they read my emails, but it's how do they interact on the app? Are they in touch with the contact center? Have they been in store to the point of sale? Do they respond on the reviews side? Have I got push notifications going? All of those channels all coming together. Forrester look at it similarly, an analytics practice that combines quantitative and qualitative data to analyze customer behaviors and motivations across touch points and over time. So that's the channels over time, but they say to optimize customer interactions and predict future behavior. So they're picking out the fact that a journey pattern can be recognized and can be used to predict. So looking at the interactions from millions of events across multiple channels to identify for individual customers what is the journey they're on and how do we predict their future behavior. And at Apteco, we've identified 5 key areas that we think you will need to work on for customer journey analytics. The first is data fusion. the challenge of understanding what's available in your channels and how you can collect that data. What is technically available? What can you pull together? What are you entitled to pull together under your GDPR registrations and data privacy and consent obligations? But it's more than that. It's also the recognition that journeys happen at different points in time. My first interaction, my second interaction, my third interaction may happen at different dates for me compared with another customer, but maybe I'm showing a pattern. So actually we need to manipulate the data so that we understand first, second and third interaction for each customer. So irrespective of when they happen in the calendar, we can look at them as the journey that that customer is on. So preparing the data, collecting the data, getting it into a single marketing technology platform where you can work on it is the foundation. And then you can undertake journey discovery, stage 2, looking at which behavioral segments are identifiable in those journeys. What journey segments can you see? What can you understand about what a customer does, and can you find patterns like that? And then documenting those, identifying them, and continuing to research them. Because that leads to number 3, where we put in place the journey automation and the orchestration of campaigns to support the journeys that are valuable. So in journey discovery, you'll be looking at the outcomes, how much value, what purchase, what service. In step 3, we're looking at the campaigns to support that, to get the outcomes that we want. Campaign automation will support us with that, triggered and event driven, to support customers through their journey. Number 4 is looking at measuring that, understanding what's happening in that journey, looking at the number of people flowing through the journey, understanding what stage they're at and how they react to your journey campaigns, and reporting those insights to your colleagues so that you can talk about the personas amongst your customers, the journeys that they're on, and how many are at each stage of that journey. And then Apteco's 5th topic for you to think about is journey optimization. Looking at how can we improve those journeys. Looking, for example, for blocks and stops. Where do people no longer proceed? Where do they divert off the path that we believe will lead to a successful transaction? What happens? How do we identify those customers and do something to help them on that customer journey? So those are 5 topics for you to think about from Apteco in the top trend for 2021. There are, of course, other topics that our delegates identified. Other than customer journey analytics, we see personification, about 50%, using personas for marketing. Consent preference management, as I said earlier, to do with regulation and compliance and transparency. CDPs, 46%, and real-time marketing, about 1/3 of our respondents were working on that as a top trend, or identifying that as a top trend for 2021. So I said I would give you key takeaways. Here they are. Not surprisingly, the arrival of COVID brought many challenges in 2020. Team sizes and outsourcing fell slightly in response to the pandemic and the economic situation, but marketing technology was maintained and in some cases increased. Perhaps that was the way that teams managed to achieve a balance. New technology adoption generally continued. Most organizations seem to continue the plans they'd already made. There's a big move online. I think we've all seen that as consumers and business clients. And AI became a priority for a small group, but many organizations already working on that AI continued to prioritize it. And when we asked about the top trend for 2021, it was customer journey analytics. We've talked a bit about some of the 5 topics you will need to consider in supporting customer journey analytics. Now, if you'd like to read more of this research and many of the references that we use to external articles and content, use your phone now. You can scan that QR code right now from the screen. That will give you a link to download the full data trend reports from Apteco, the 2021 data trend report. You can also download the handout, which is in the go to webinar system. Right now, we've got a copy of all of these slides with a link in it. Or I think one of my colleagues will have just pasted it in the chat window, and we'll email you afterwards anyway with a link to follow up. Hopefully, you'll find that as a useful and interesting material. So that's the end of our webinar. Thank you very much. I hope it's been a useful and insightful half hour of your day. If you'd like to stay in touch with Apteco, you can email us at info@apteco.com, visit us at www.apteco.com. But wherever you are, whatever position the pandemic is in, please stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again on an Apteco webinar. Thank you very much.